you have anything else.
I have nothing else to add. Thank
I'm
you.
not happy with that at all. Okay, that's what I have to say, but really, I don't know how you can propose anything without a plan. It's beyond me. Thank you.
Len, when you can just step up, sign in, and speak, that's fine. But let this gentleman go first, and you can go next.
Dave Kaplan, 263 Intervale Road. I live nowhere near this property, but I was noticed because I've got some RCW behind me because of the Waterview settlement. And I'm hearing a lot of potential concerns here, so I just want to share my perspective on this, having lived through a zone change or overlay or whatever it was called. We were promised a lot by the developer. One of the promises was, and there were charts here all over the place, we would never see this development from our properties. And they had these different surveys with lines going across, and they proved to the council and they proved to the audience that we would never see the development. And you're laughing because you know where this is going. I would gladly invite any one of you to my house to look at the development that I was promised I would never see. And that's before they've installed the lights that they promised we would never see. So as I hear these concerns here, it's just bringing back a lot of very negative memories of that experience, which was an awful experience. It dragged on for me since from 2005 to 2015. And I fought and I fought and I fought, and some of you were there and lived it with me. And for those of you who weren't there, and I wish Mrs. Peterson were here to hear this, the residents really have a unique perspective, and I would just implore the governing body to listen closely to the residents. And if they are feeling like there's not a lot of time for them, if it's possible, I would recommend that they get some time to come to the presentations. And I would agree, I knew nothing about this until I was noticed, and I called Mr. Lott, who called me back. He was great, answered all my questions. I appreciated it. But I, even living 3 or 4 miles away, just had some concerns because, as that gentleman said, the notice, by design maybe, it's a legal document, it's just very vague and it's very minimal. And if you've got a lot of questions and a big turnout, please listen to the audience, and if you have to postpone it, postpone it.
Yeah, I'm Len Ferriello, and I'm the land manager for Wildlife Preserves. And there's a lot of confusion here. We are not here for a building proposal. This is a zone change. Our land was zoned residential. The township rezoned it to recreation, conservation, and wildlife. It's very appropriate. It was an appropriate land decision. But the previous zone lacked viable building uses and resulted in a 3-year court battle that cost Wildlife Preserves and the taxpayers of Parsippany hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the state of New Jersey, land value is based on what can be built, even if nothing is ever built. And the previous RCW zone lacked viable uses and reduced the value of Wildlife Preserves land to pennies on the dollar. This isn't helpful for a nonprofit organization struggling to hold land in its natural state. By adding some permitted uses, the land gained some value and the lawsuit has been settled. This isn't a building proposal. It's just a settlement to add some viable uses to the land. It doesn't say we are planning to build anything, and I think that's where the confusion is, listening to Bob Algier like we're ready to break ground on something. By settling the legal battle, Mayor Soriano and the council is saving the taxpayers of Parsippany hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal costs, and he's making peace with a philanthropic environmental land trust that spent 65 years saving land in the township of Parsippany at no cost to the taxpayers. Residents should be proud of the mayor and council And we're settling a dispute that's raged on for 4 years, since 2014, I believe. So I just wanted to clear that up. This isn't a building plan. This is just to put some value back in our land that was taken away when the zone was changed. There's already lots of uses in the land that we can do. This isn't saying that we could build an environmental education center if we ever chose to do so, or have a ranger station, just a place where the rangers can put their boots on and go out on patrol. It's nothing more than that. It's not, if there's ever a plan, it'll be in the future, and you'll be noticed, and it'll be a site plan like Bob Algier was asking for, a location, and it'll go before the planning board, and there'll be an opportunity to speak. But this is just adding some viable building uses to a zone that already exists. And I hope that helped clarify what this is all about. Thank you.
Good evening. Vince Aperowick, 4 Brookside Court, Parsippany. In 2014, as Lenny indicated, we voted on this to be an RCW. There were many questions asked about the intent of the wildlife preserve. Their mission at that time was not to build at all. They came before the planning board and asked for a rezoning. And we said, well, why? We were given the answer, because for tax purposes, a tax advantage. The question was asked at that time, do you intend to build? And the attorney representing wildlife said, not at this time. So what I'm saying to the board, the council this evening is, we were lied to before. As far as I'm concerned, we're being lied to again. If their intent is not to build, then let them tell us that. Do you intend to build, Lenny? Do you intend to build on this property?
There are no.
All right, sir, well, this is for...
All right, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, that's all I have to say. I take issue with his presentation tonight because I don't believe him. We were lied to before. Thank you.
Thank you. See no one else coming forward, entertain a motion to close the public
I
hearing?
think we have somebody in the back over here. Would you like to come up, sir?
Yes, I would. Is it open now for any dialogue, or is it just?
Just on this. Just on that, yes, okay.
Well, he missed it. He missed that special session, so
Right.
you want to give him an opportunity?
No, it's just on this.
No,
Just on this.
we're still in the public hearing for the ordinance, so we can probably come back to him after we're done.
You just sign in, and after we're done with the public hearing, we'll allow you an opportunity to speak since you did come in late.
All right.
Council President, the accessory uses that are listed, could we read that into the record so they hear what the potential accessory uses are, if they do apply for them before the planning board?
Sure.
Would you like me to do that, or?
Sure. Please. Thank you.
Okay. So the ordinance establishes standards for accessory uses for properties that are in common ownership that consist of at least 200 acres. One environmental education center not exceeding 4,000 square feet, provided that the location be at least 150 feet away from any residentially zoned property adjacent to the RCW district. It defines environmental education centers as including but not limited to management offices, libraries, research facilities, classrooms, displays, and other similar uses. It establishes a standard for one maintenance garage not to exceed 1,000 square feet in size and shall be located 150 feet away from any property line of any residentially zoned property adjacent to the RCW district. Establishes a standard for one ranger relief station for the staging of personnel and the housing of incidental equipment of not more than 850 square feet, which shall be located at least 150 feet away from any line from any lot line of any residentially zoned property adjacent to the RCW zone district, and establishes a standard for nature observatory structures that they be at least 150 feet away from any lot line of any residentially zoned property adjacent to the RCW zone district. And finally, it establishes a standard for public access to any development in the RCW district shall be made from either Beverwick Road or Troy Meadow Road.
Also, in regard to the 800 square foot provided for any improvements, said station shall not be used for dwelling purposes.
Correct.
That's something I think that it will not be housed for the ranger or any family members. It's strictly for the ranger to be there and to watch over the property.
That's correct.
He can't get up again, can he? He's got,
The hearing's still open.
yeah, you might as well have him.
I just want to say that I think everyone's concern here.
You have to come up to the microphone
He's
because
coming,
it's
he's
recorded.
coming, He's coming.
I wanted to say that everyone's concerned here that lives in the area, the main concern is location. Location. Now, there's a site off of Beverwick Road. It's called Patriots Path. There's great locations. Why try to put this in a residential area? There's so many other places it could go. And I think that's everyone's concern here, is location. I don't have any personal feeling about not building it for any particular reason other than to protect our neighborhood and our area. I've been broken into 3 times because it's so easy to do in our neighborhood, but it's just not the right place for it. If they're thinking about putting it where they're putting it, it's not fair to the neighborhood or the homeowners. There's plenty of places to put this thing down Troy Road, down the bottom of Troy Road. That's it. That's all my general feeling.
Thank you.
Are you going to say something about it being possibly more than 150?
Sure, I'll tell them that they're,
So
go
as
ahead.
I'm understanding it.
Please state your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Melissa
okay.
Lamello, 1250 South Beverwick.
And you have to speak into the microphone so they can hear you in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Hold it.
Melissa Lamello, 1250 South Beverwick. So, a couple questions. So my first question is, obviously there was some sort of legal argument over what the zoning of the property was.
Just please speak into the mic.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, there was some sort of legal conflict, right, around what the zoning of the property was. And that was resolved in this settlement to rezone the property. So I know that there's a lot of
into the mic, ma'am? Sorry.
Take it out. Yeah.
Okay. So clearly, there's a lot of people who want to understand what it's going to look like, where it's going to be. Now, I know you had, the previous gentleman made a comment about putting it on South Beverwick Road. I will say, as a resident, and actually directly across the street from Patriots Path, it's not an ideal location at all, because first of all, there's traffic, and second of all, there's a lot of kids in the area, etc. So I guess my question is, if there is a proposal that comes through to build something, would there be an opportunity for maybe a sampling of residents to form some sort of committee to have input into what it looks like, where the exact location does? Nobody wants it next to their house. I completely appreciate that, but I haven't seen all the possibilities, all the opportunities, what could be an optimal solution. So I don't know if that's something that's typically done, because I think people just typically submit plans to the township and then they get approved. But a lot of people have a lot of vested interest in this because it could potentially impact their property values. And I think the other worry that folks have is, what if it's not used for the intended purposes of trying to preserve that area? I mean, there's many nice things that maybe could be done, an observatory or boardwalk, so that people could optimize the use of that property. But I don't want this to be, well, I don't want it on my block, and I don't want it on my block. Like, what is optimal? What's best for everyone? Clearly, it's been resolved from a legal perspective. The zoning has been changed. We can't change that at this point. But how do we go forward and do something that maybe won't make everybody happy, but maybe would be something that everyone could kind of live with and feel like they've had some sort of partnership or some sort of input into what it turns out to be, if anything is decided to be built?
So just a couple of legal responses. From a legal perspective, what we've done here is not rezone the property. The property has always been zoned RCW.
Okay.
All right. What we've done is, Mr. Banish indicates, is we've established some standards that better define accessory uses. In doing so, the setback distances that I read, those are the minimums. Those are the minimum setback distances. All right. So any deviation from the minimum would have to require a variance. All right. Members of the public would certainly receive notice of any development application. For those people within 200 feet of the development footprint would receive notice of the application from the planning board. You would have an opportunity at that time to express your public comment. We would certainly encourage, neighbors to work with wildlife should there be a development application filed.
Okay.
That's kind of the legal response to your questions.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Council. How are you? 1284 South Berwick Road, Carroll DeMarsco. Just from listening to this is about conserving the land, right? So are we doing this for the animals? Are we conserving the turkeys? Are we conserving the deer? Are we conserving the fox that are in the only land that's left in Parsippany? Because Parsippany has been so built, there's very little land left. We have 2 acres. They built behind us, in front of us. Our land is now swamp. Where you're talking about building, I'm assuming, is Troy Meadows? The whole area? Is that what we're talking about? Does everybody know that there's Lyme disease? It's completely infested with Lyme disease. So we want to put more people in there so they can get Lyme disease and come out and be more sick. I don't think this is good. This is definitely not good for Parsippany. There's very little land left for the animals, and we shouldn't be building on everything. There's nothing left. There really isn't. Our road on South Beverwick Road and Troy are both traffic. It's ridiculous. I mean, you can't get out at 6 o'clock in the morning. You can't get out at 8 o'clock in the morning. You can't get out at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's all the way from 46. The light from 46 all the way to the end of South Beverwick Road and Troy at 6:30 is backed up. So now we want to bring in more people. I'm very confused about this, and I don't think the town needs this at all.
Are you going to say
The only thing I can say is that they're entitled to the benefit of the use of the property.
Yeah, but they're not doing it always.
Go ahead,
That's
Nick.
what these-
Before, in response to that, do we want to say that we're not talking about housing?
Right.
That's correct. I mean,
I mean,
the-
we're not
the
talking
zone-
about housing.
Right.
That needs to be talked.
Right, that's absolutely correct. I mean, the zone district, the RCW zone district, does not permit residential use, as Mr. Banish explained. The zone district is, primarily addressing the recreation, conservation, and wildlife use of the property. Housing is not a permitted use. If the owner of the property were to propose a use that was not permitted by zoning, they would require a use variance at the Board of Adjustment. That's a heavy burden. A heavy burden.
Yeah, I was
Sir,
wondering,
no, sir, you've already had your turn. We have to have other people now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've already
I
done.
has a question based on what he was stating.
No, but
Have somebody.
Go ahead,
say-
Ed.
we have rules here, so.
Where is
I'll answer the question.
Well,
Go
where
ahead.
is the RCW area that's zoned for building? Is it the entire Meadows, or is it just Troy Meadow Road?
Well, as I explained earlier, the RCW zone district actually appears in several locations in the township, all right? I don't have the zoning map in front of me, but I think that, wildlife owns 200 contiguous acres. I think most of that is what people would commonly call, Troy Meadows.
'Cause, I mean, it'd be helpful
Wildlife
for
is
the
really about
residents to know where the areas are.
Wildlife is really about 1,500 acres
All
in
total.
Parsippany.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I just thought it would be helpful if we knew what we were.
Yeah, it'd been
Discuss.
helpful to
It
have
would've
a
been,
map.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
Yeah. Can we table this in any way? Can we hold off on this? Yes, we could. Can we have some sort of a, can we table it?
Well, if you table it, you're going to have to reopen the public hearing again.
No, why don't we do that? We seem to have a lot of, questions from the residents, and
Yeah, maybe we could have some kind of
I think some sort of.
map or something
yeah.
up there.
Can I make a suggestion, if I may? We need a better presentation. The verbal is not sufficient. What we need is a map, a big map of wildlife preserves, to show the people what we're talking about.
That's it.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Mr.
So
President,
can it be continued then to
Yes.
say August 21st?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why
I
don't,
think we
why don't
should
we
do that.
continue it to August
Would that help
21st and have
Your questions that you're going to
drawings?
ask?
I have no question. I just have a comment.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that whatever gets established, I'm assuming what I'm hearing is something that would be a situation where people could learn about the wildlife, learn about the not only the animals but the plants. But I also hope that if it does get established, that the prehistoric creation of it be made really clear. That was glacial, but before the glaciers, there was hot, boiling earth where nothing lived. And as things grew and everything, the glaciers came down, that's what caused the meadows. That's what caused this huge, huge kind of divot where all of this meadows has been developed. That's neat in itself. But the next thing is that when the settlers came here, I've always understood that this early settlers that came to this area went, this place is covered in trees. How are we going to farm? How are we going to live? But that huge area with only grass, yes, and they all split it up. My family inherited, 2.5 acres, because they all split it up and they all got together. They ditched it to drain it. They went down there and they hayed it. They dug holes to find a spring. They chilled the milk there before the milk was then delivered to Newark. All that neat stuff needs to be, just as Craftsman Farms helps people to understand and really grasp where we live. That is not just the foxes and the turkeys. They're cool, but they're in anybody's backyard, I think. Possums and I had black vultures today, like 5 or 6 of them, landing in the middle of Troy Road. People didn't know what to do. But anyway, that's neat too. But I think that if it was a way of educating and exciting people about where we live and the history, way back history, that would be pretty cool too. So
thank you.
I think that would be
Thank you.
great.
Yeah.
Good
Yes,
idea.
Great
Yes.
idea. Thank you.
Yes.
But I think part of this is for the wildlife. There was
Oh,
gonna be some
absolutely.
observation
Yeah,
is.
observation,
area
yeah.
Correct.
for.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
We still have other people.
No.
No,
He's,
yeah.
Oh,
he's talking about this.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I apologize.
Yeah.
Before you do though, can I just just ask the question, just to clarify? We are definitely considering to continue the public hearing then to the 21st, so that we'd have drawings and
Yes.
designs
Yeah, I
and,
think we should.
and you can see the, to
These
say
people's
150
questions can get
feet,
answered.
yes. Yeah, and it'll be clearer, a
Yeah,
picture,
Maybe some different kind of presentation.
Yeah, I think wildlife should,
yeah.
definitely.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Hi, I don't live in Parsippany currently, but I am looking to set up a sustainable farm in Parsippany. I think the location is pretty nice, being a crossroads of 80 and 287, And when there's land for consideration, I think it's important to think about how much usable land there is, farmland, how much oxygen the land that's in Parsippany is producing, if it's just asphalt, or what kind of business you're putting in there. But I have a small sustainable farm startup where I make organic soil by reducing waste streams. So I work with several businesses in Randolph and in Parsippany and a few other towns, collecting coffee grounds from Starbucks and some other places, and other eggs from some places, and just different things that normally go into the trash, and I mix them together and use some proprietary processes to make a sustainable soil. A lot of it is just involved with, I used to be a master gardener, Rutgers certified master gardener for several years, and before that I was a University of Illinois volunteer master gardener. So I come up with a lot of processes to sort of simplify and reduce carbon, which is a major problem for us as a Earth. And when you're looking to start a business, I want to have a sustainable, environmentally sustainable and conscientious business. So the way that I process these wastes, rather than just making regular compost out of them, a lot of carbon goes into the air. With the wet processing, wet composting techniques that I use, the carbon stays in the soil, so it makes a more fertile soil, and it actually collects carbon from the atmosphere rather than releasing it. So it produces atmospheric carbon, which is a big part of global warming. So I'd like to set up a business here doing that, and as land's getting harder and harder to find in Parsippany, it'd be nice if I was able to set up my business here, because I think it would be good for the community to have an organization that's really looking to not earn profits necessarily, but more just to help facilitate and solve some of the problems that we have locally and globally. I used to be the teacher for Spectrum 360 and Independence 360. I created their horticulture program, and I'd like to go back to start taking some of them to train them and teach them to have them work to make our soil products and things, so that way they have trouble finding jobs. So it's not just sustaining the environment, it's also sustaining populations of humans that don't really get as much funding after they turn 21. So I'd really enjoy your support for Sweet Virginia Soil, which is a company I'd be excited to bring to Parsippany. Thank you very much.
Can you,
yeah.
can you give your information
Yeah, I would like
to,
I would like the information because
Khaled?
yes, Khaled, but I will getting it from him, your information,
Okay.
because I would like to put you in touch with our recycling coordinator that does more than just recycling things.
Yeah,
We
a lot
also
of-
do
a lot
a
of,
lot
you
of
know,
mulching.
mulching and yard waste and
yes,
things like
and
that
we
could be
have a
used
great
globally.
we have a great Parks and Forestry in the name of Jim Walsh, and we're doing a lot of that. So in concert with Greg Schneider, our Public Works Director, this fella Chad, and also Jimmy Walsh. So I'll get and put
Yeah,
that,
put
put
Okay,
you
yeah,
get
that'd
that
be great, because I am
information.
trying to form and get commitments and relationships with municipalities to be able to
Because we
start
are doing a
implementing.
lot of that.
Yeah, I know a lot of
yeah.
communities are starting to now. On
Yeah.
on the West Coast, it's sort of become commonplace, but the
Right.
East Coast is kind of just starting.
We're catching up.
And I'd like to help
Yeah.
everyone to catch up here and maybe go
Yeah.
further.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
do have business cards.
If you
I could
have a
just
card,
write
Give
down.
that, give
And I
that
would-
to
Khaled?
the clerk
Khaled.
down at the
Okay.
end.
All right, we'll do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Give him two.
Thank you.
This way I'll get a card. Thank you.
Hi, Julia Peterson, 25 Old Parsippany Road. I wanted to go a little pre-2014, and the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee was very involved in this pre-2014. And what was going on was there was a proposal to develop, I can't think, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 12 more houses in the Allen Drive area and off of Parkside. And we were very concerned about archaeological remains that were there at that time. And we got very involved with what should happen there. And as it turned out, I think this legal suit was kind of a result of, Wildlife Preserves has done a really beautiful job preserving the Troy Meadows. The Troy Meadows is, as you say, it's over 1,500 acres. It's one of the largest pieces of unoccupied land in Parsippany. And while we want to see it preserved, when it was zoned RCW, that was the trade-off for that was, okay, we won't build the houses. We won't monetize that land by building the houses. but what's in it for us? I don't know, I'm not party to any of the legal stuff at all, but I suspect that often settlements like these are a negotiated settlement between the interests of several parties, and that may be what happened here. And I think that it's probably true that they haven't even figured, there's no, they don't know where they want to put a building, but they don't want to continue holding 1,500 acres of land with no permission to do anything on it. So that might be something to think about. I'm not factually involved in it after 2014, but I know that our committee was very worried about the additional housing that would be built. And so, in that the housing is not going to be built, we all should be grateful.
Thank you.
Isn't it limited as well by wetland and things like that, Jim?
Once you've come up, sir,
Yeah.
that's our rules. You can only come up once. You can't keep coming back
Well,
and
he
forth.
came up. He came
Huh?
up before.
Yeah.
He came up before.
You're gonna start.
We're getting the other guy to come up all the time. What are we doing? Are we letting him get up or what?
Up to the chair.
The lady that just spoke indicated that the houses are not being built. In 2014, plans were approved for building, and I've inquired about those plans since then, and I couldn't get an answer. So as far as we know, houses are still going to be built, 3 or 4 between Brookside Court and Troy Meadow Road. And this is what we took issue with before. So I don't know whether you thought that, right? Okay. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Anita Shotwell. I'm a managing trustee with Wildlife Preserves. I didn't intend to say anything, and I promise you I'm not good at it. But I wanted to let you know, I personally come from an animal welfare background, speaking to the woman who was concerned about the wildlife, and spent more than 30 years in nonprofit before I started with Wildlife Preserves. And I can assure you that we have had no meetings with developers, no meetings with architects, no plans drawn up for the property, no plans for housing. There was some miscommunication back in 2014, which was actually my very first meeting with Wildlife Preserves. And it blew into some completely unexpected, well, I would expect, I guess, actually, with that residents would be concerned, but it was a misunderstanding. And this whole zoning thing spun out of control as a result of that. Now, as a nonprofit, it doesn't behoove us to make enemies of the residents. The whole point is that we have a cooperative relationship with Parsippany and East Hanover residents, where we have another 500 acres. We have not been able to do that since I began, because we've been embroiled in a lawsuit over this zoning, which has only now begun to take sort of a more positive and collaborative turn with this administration. We had a tree planting earlier this year in April, where some of the members of the town environmental commission came out. We've had a few cleanup days and things of that nature. And we are happy to work with residents and happy to hear from residents about things that we can do to serve the community and make improvements. And if there is some time down the line where there would be discussions, and there are no plans for anything in the works, that would be something that would have to go through the planning board. People would have to be noticed, plans would have to be drawn up. If you're asking for plans, the only thing you're going to get in 3 weeks that would be different from today, which might be helpful, is a map of Troy Meadows, and you can see how much Wildlife Preserves owns in Parsippany and how much we own in East Hanover. And you could see where setbacks, or theoretically where road would be, access would be permitted to public buildings. But that's the only thing you're going to see, and maybe that is helpful. That will help people put minds to rest. But again, no plans in the works. I'm not saying that we never will, but that's something that is not it's in the dream stage.
Okay, hold on, we can't have discussion with. Good.
And we're interested in working proactively, and that was with the miscommunication in those plans for that residential, and that was something that I had not even seen as a trustee, and it was an error on the part of the attorney who does not represent wildlife preserves. That is someone who represented us for a very specific case, and we have not a plan for housing. Is that correct, as I understand it? Yeah, so that, again, was a misunderstanding. I'm happy to talk to anyone at some other time and try to explain that. Thank you.
Well, I think if you do come back, when you come back on the 21st, and have the map and possibly some of the articles that you want to build, the ranger station, the garage, if you can note where possibly they will be built, I think that will, I know you're questioning, you're giving me a questionable look, and I understand that, but we have this in our ordinance that things could possibly be built, and if you could give the residents and us an idea as to where they will be, I think it will be helpful to all.
They don't know where they will be.
Or they could do.
Go ahead.
Do something, I don't know. These people are questioning everything, you know?
Hi, my name is Roberta Melli. I'm at 38 Whitewood Drive, which is near the Mount Tabor Golf Course. And I, too, received this certified letter, and I don't know if this relates to us in any way.
No.
And so I got actually 4 certified letters about this meeting,
They wanted you here.
and I don't know if that
You're in the
has,
same situation as
future.
the other gentleman back there, just because you have some of that near you. You
Yeah.
receive that, but
Right.
this has nothing to do with where you're at.
So this isn't something I need to worry about, except for my
No, I
my
got phone
township
calls
neighbors.
I got phone calls from people in Forge Pond, that got notice for this too. And I could explain to them that they
Well,
were not involved.
Because it shows how vague the information is. I mean, I've been poring over the town's website, I've been trying to figure something out, and there's really no information, so I feel for these people.
I think to be fair to the people that do live over there, I think all of Parsippany residents need to be concerned about all of us, not just wherever we live. So, we need to be.
I agree, but I see their frustration in not even having the information, a map or anything. This is
I
really
agree with you.
not the best way to present information.
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
Council President, perhaps we could have Mr. Banish go ahead and prepare a map that shows the Troy Meadow area, or those areas of the township that are at least 200 acres in the
Yes.
RCW zone, and then we could plot out the minimum 150-foot setback distance, perhaps for the next meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name's Tom Lundy. Now I'm just
What's your
sitting
address,
back
sir?
there, 1050 South Beverick Road. I'm sitting over in that corner and I'm listening to people talk. Now my property that I bought and I spent my life savings for my kids, is Green Acres. I step off my driveway, I'm in Green Acres. 150 feet off of that property line, that's nothing. You put a tower there, you can see my kids. It's kind of disturbing. Everybody's just a little frustrated. I understand that they don't have plans. I get it. I understand the zoning. I've worn many hats in my career of my life. You know, it's just frustrating. And you guys have to understand, and he needs to understand, because I've seen his response on his face many a times, especially when the older gentleman in the back was talking. He giggled, he laughed. I didn't like that. I don't know you personally. You might be a great guy. I don't know. It's just a lot of frustrating. Now, there's ticks. Somebody said something about that. I agree. I walk in my backyard, I get ticks. I'm not even in Green Acres. My dog goes back, I get ticks. I have to spray pesticide to get rid of the ticks. That is a concern. I pull out of my driveway. Yeah, there's traffic. I probably try to almost get hit at least twice a day trying to get my truck and trailer out of there. It's a tough street. I agree they should have a ranger station, something, somewheres on the property. I think it would be great. I walk those woods all the time. There's a lot of trouble in there sometimes. I've almost got hit by a quad. I've had my kids out there. They almost got hit by a quad. It's a tough situation. So everybody's just very concerned about what's going to happen. Nobody wants this built in their backyard, but everybody wants to work together. I can see that on everybody's face. So I think everybody just needs to take a step back and realize the fact that this is a good thing, but 400 square foot building, scary. I don't want that next to my house. Nobody does. But it has to be figured out. And at this point, there's no plans, as I understand. And there's no sneaky thing that anybody's going to do, right?
Absolutely.
Right, no.
Okay. I think that's everybody's concern. Everybody's afraid that, that happened to me in Lake Hiawatha. I had a house, bought and paid for. Neighbor said, I'm going to do a small addition. Wake up one morning, there's a tower next to me. Same thing on the other side of me. Same thing behind me. I had a little baby swimming pool with my daughter in it. I look up, I got a neighbor looking at me, a neighbor looking at me. It's kind of disturbing. There's my little girl swimming around in the pool. So, just have to understand that nobody wants that in their backyard. I lived through it, and it's not good. So that's all I have to say. And no disrespect. I just saw you giggle a couple times, and I saw you. My eyes work, my ears work, and I'm a good judge of character. So when he was talking, you were laughing, and that wasn't good. So that's why he got upset about it. And I just wanted to call out, and I wanted to thank you because you cleared up a lot for me by coming up and talking, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, see no one else come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion.
And the motion would be to carry the application, the
Yes.
ordinance until the August 21st meeting.
Yes.
Yep.
Wait a minute.
All right, that's my motion.
First, we're going to do a motion to close the public hearing, then we'll do your motion.
Yes.
Motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 2018-12 by myself.
And seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is closed. Now, Councilmember DePiero, if you'd like to make your motion.
Motion to carry this hearing until our next meeting.
Second, Grignani.
Can part of the motion also be what will be our obligation to the public? Can it be stated, besides what you just said, Jim? Is there going to be anything more than a drawing? Will it be more of an explanation, and will we be able to do a PowerPoint?
Well, it'd be a good idea if we had a map of all of wildlife preserves, and then within that have a map of the RCW zoned property that we're talking about now, and where that abuts residential properties would be appropriate.
And I can work with Mr. Banish to come up with a presentation for the next hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Motion by Mr. DePiero.
Yeah.
Second by Grignani.
Okay, so a motion by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. And the motion is to carry this hearing until what?
Our next meeting.
Next meeting.
Okay, until next meeting. Okay, roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. This will be carried until the August 21st meeting.
And since we're carrying this, there's no further notice required.
Correct.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Okay, Mr. DePiero, non-consent agenda, resolution 2018-139.
Resolution 2018-139. Resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills authorizing the application to the Complete Streets Technical Assistance Grant Program. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Mrs. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, Ms. McCarthy.
It's R 2018-140, resolution of the Township Council of Township Council of the Township Council of Parsippany-Troy Hills confirming the appointment of the Township Public Defender and awarding contract for professional services to John Paul Velez Esquire for the year 2018. Motion to approve.
I have a question before we approve this. Is the gentleman going to be receiving the same amount of money that the previous prosecutor?
Ms. Grignani, yes, he's going to be receiving the same amount of money that the previous prosecutor is going to be
Thank you.
receiving. Yes.
Second by Grignani.
Okay, so motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, just take a look at consent agenda, see if there's any questions. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion.
Oh,
Motion
sorry.
made by
Second.
Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
Okay, have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
No.
Not making it.